Hey everyone, this is Ethan Dre with Be Creative Studios, and today we are going to be doing a quick tutorial in Photoshop on how to use the clone stamp tool. Alright, so what the clone stamp tool is good for is it's good for duplicating objects in an image, or it's good for removing defects in an image. Okay, so we have our document here, and you can see we have all these birds flying over the beach, and whenever I hide my top layer in my layer window, you'll notice that not all of those birds were originally there. So that's going to be the final outcome of today's tutorial. I'm going to go ahead and delete that layer, and I'm going to add a new one by clicking on the icon at the bottom of the layer window, and I'm going to double click that layer and rename it cloned. Okay, so once we go over to our toolbox, you can see a stamp icon, or you can hit S, and that's going to take you to your clone stamp tool, making sure that you don't have the pattern stamp tool selected. Okay, and once we select the clone stamp tool, you'll notice that we have settings up here, similar to the brush. So when we click down on our brush settings, you can tell that you have a wide variety of brushes to choose from, but what we're going to use today is the soft round brush. That's going to give it a pretty soft edge for whatever object we clone, and it'll be more or less seamless. We also have our opacity, which is the transparency of our layer. Our flow is the transparency of our individual brush strokes. Align sample we are going to want checked. Okay, so make sure that align sample is checked. And we also want to make sure that all layers is checked or selected. That way we're not required to work on the background layer, and if we aren't happy with the results, we can just delete that layer. Okay, so you want to make sure that you have your cloned layer selected, and the next thing we're going to do is set our sampling point. The way we set our sampling point is we're going to hold an option and click. Okay? And our sampling point is essentially the location in our document that we are cloning. So we're just going to hold an option, and we're going to click on this bird in the top left, and we're going to let go of option. Once I start to move my cursor to the right, you'll notice that that image is almost following us, giving us kind of a preview of what our clone is going to look like. So once you left click and hold down, you can start to clone your image, and you'll notice that the crosshairs are still at that sampling point, okay, and they're following our stamp equidistantly and consistently. Alright, so once your object is cloned, you're just going to let up on the left click. Alright, now if you want to clone another bird, we have align sample still selected. So our crosshairs are still going to be equidistant from our stamp. Okay, so we're actually cloning the clone right now. Now if we were to have align sample unchecked, and we were going to sample from this first bird, we could do so. Alright, but then once I let up again, it's going right back to that original sampling point. Okay, our crosshairs are no longer equidistant from our stamp. As you can see, it's still at that original bird all the way to the left. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete those. Alright. So the difference between having an aligned sample is that our sampling point is always going to be the same distance away from our stamp. Okay, no matter how many times we restart, it's going to continue to follow our stamp at the same distance. Okay, if we don't have an align sample checked, it's always going to be resetting to your original sampling point. Okay, now that I've shown you how to clone or duplicate an object, I'm going to go over how to remove a defect or just remove an unwanted object from your image using the clone stamp tool. So as you can see, I deleted all of our cloned birds. I created a new empty layer and I named it remove defect. And all we're going to do is we're just going to clone stamp over this bird right here. So it's the same concept. We're just going to hold in option, and then we're going to left click where we want to sample from. Okay, and if I zoom in, this might be a little bit easier. Alright, and as you can see, we're just going to paint over top of this bird. Now notice I don't have align samples checked, so my crosshairs are always resetting here. if I had a line sample checked and I wanted to go over top of this bird, the problem with that is our crosshairs are still following equidistantly, and it's just going to keep cloning that bird once you cover it up. So you want to make sure a line sample is unchecked. Okay, set your sampling point and just do a little bit at a time. Now remember, every time you let up on that left mouse click, it resets to its original sampling point, which is what we want. Now you'll see that this area is a little bit darker than its surrounding area, and this is a problem that you might run into with the clone stamp, which isn't really a big deal because all we have to do is go to our adjustment layers, maybe brightness and contrast, and I'm just going to lock it down to our layer, remove defect. Okay, and I'm going to turn that brightness up a little bit just so we have that blend going. Alright, so once we hide that layer, we can tell that that's a lot better. And once we hide our remove defect layer, you can see that it's a pretty clean cover up. And the last point I want to make with the clone stamp is that you're actually able to clone from one document into another document. So for right now, I'm just going to choose this top bird just to give you an example, return to our original document, and we're going to throw them up here. Okay? Alright, so it's the same concept, you're just working in between documents. Now obviously we're going to have to add adjustment layers to make this blend in a little bit more, change some things up. But from there you can always clean it up with layer masks as well. Okay? So what we learned with the clone stamp is you're able to duplicate objects and you're also able to remove defects. You can do this in the same document or you can do this over a number of documents. Just remember that if the lighting and the contrast and the saturation isn't matching up, you may have to use your adjustment layers. And you always want to work on an empty layer, that way you're not cloning on the background layer. Okay? I hope you all enjoyed this tutorial of the clone stamp. This is Ethan Dre with Be Creative Studios, and please check back for our newest tutorials.